Hello and welcome to the Byte Summit. In this session, I'm going to talk to you about automating workflows using Microsoft Power Automate. A little bit about me first. My name's Emma Linton. I work for Quantic and I'm a customer engagement consulting manager. I'm jointly responsible for a team of over 20 people. I've got about 4 years experience in the Microsoft platform, including Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. But I've got over 30 years experience in IT, in development, service delivery, training and project management, and various other things. I've worked in a number of sectors, including local government, social housing, education, and also things like the automotive industry. I've got various certifications. You can see the ones that I've got here that relate specifically to Power Platform. And yeah, today I would like to take you through some information about Power Automate. I want to give you an overview, first of all, of Power Automate and where it sits within the Power Platform. And then we're going to deep dive into cloud flows. We're going to concentrate on cloud flows, partially because of the amount of time that we've got here, but also because that's where people tend to start off with Power Automate. If you've never seen it before, this is where people tend to start. I'm going to take you through the key components of cloud flows. I'm then going to do a bit of a demo of how you can build a flow and how that runs and what it looks like. I've also got some real life examples for you of Power Automates that I've built in the last year for clients. And then at the end, we'll wrap up and you can send any questions in via the chat. So to move forward into the overview. So Microsoft Power Platform spans across the whole of Office, Azure, Dynamics, Dataverse. It's a huge platform, and it's split into these slightly different areas. So in the Microsoft Power Platform, we've got Power BI, which is all your analytics, it's your reporting, it's showing you really great visuals about the data that you're holding in your databases, and it can pull data from anywhere. Power Apps. So Power Apps include both model-driven apps. If anybody's using Microsoft Dynamics at the moment, that's a good example of a model-driven app, but also Canvas apps that we can use on our mobiles and our tablets. We have Power Automate, which is what we're looking at today, which is all about automating processes. And then Power Virtual Agents, which are intelligent chatbots that you can set up and use to take your customers through, like I said, a live chat scenario. All of these things sit on top of, firstly, our data sources. The Microsoft data source here is mainly Dataverse, but all of these things can connect using data connectors to hundreds of other data sources. I'll explain a little bit more about connectors later on in the slideshow. But yeah, Dataverse is the main one for Microsoft. We also have AI Builder there, which allows you to do things like language recognition, object detection, scanning forms and automatically dragging information off a form and processing it. So yeah, there's lots of functionality in here that we can do within Microsoft Power Platform. Talking specifically about Power Automate though, so why would we use Power Automate? First of all, it helps you to automate things that are really repetitive, things that our employees are having to do over and over again. And it just takes all of that pain away from them and helps them to work more effectively and concentrate on the things that actually help them move forward in their day-to-day work. So this could be, emails that we're having to send to teams or Excel spreadsheets that we're having to fill out or copy data from one place to another. We can replace all of that with Power Automate. Because we're automating things, that automatically then improves data quality. You're avoiding any kind of manual entry by your teams. You're making sure that things are always processed in exactly the same way, in exactly the same order. So straight away, it improves the quality and the consistency of your data. Power Automate's scalable. It can be really, really small. The demo I'm going to show you in a little bit is a very, very simple Power Automate that just does a couple of things, but it can also be used to do data migrations, to transform data. It can be used to connect to multiple different sources, and use those different connections to do many different things. Again, I'm going to show you some examples, but it might be that you're connecting to 3 different data sources, pulling all that data together and outputting it into a report or a Word template. It really can be as big as you want it to be. I've already mentioned connectors a little bit, but yeah, we can connect and automate tasks across hundreds of apps. So Power Automate can basically connect to and talk to things like Outlook and Excel and Word, as well as things like DocuSign, SQL Server, Access databases, and anything really that's out there and has an API, we can connect to it. It also has a built-in approvals engine, so you can use Power Automate to send emails to your users and get them to approve certain tasks, and then record the response and do other things based on that response. So rather than somebody manually having to send an email and ask for approval for something and then manually deal with the response, we can use Power Automate to do all of that for us. And finally, it's accessible anywhere. We can use this obviously on desktops and laptops, but there is a Power Apps app that you can get from either your you can have it on your iPhone or on Android. You can run your Power Automates from your mobile phone, and carry it around with you. It's really accessible. So what are the different types of Power Automate? So there's 3 main types of Power Automate. There are cloud flows, which is what we're going to dig into in deeper detail in a bit. Cloud flows allow you to trigger automations, and you can do them in 3 different ways. We can either automate this trigger, so that means that it's being triggered by something happening somewhere else. That could be that a record is being created or that an email is appearing in your inbox. You can choose what the trigger is going to be and then decide what steps you want to take after that trigger. It might be that you want it to be triggered by the user. So it could be that you have an app on your mobile phone with a button, and when you press the button, you want the Power Automate to run. So that's an example of an instant cloud flow. And the third one there is that we can have scheduled cloud flows. And they're exactly what they sound like. We can set them up to run daily, weekly, or monthly, and whatever kind of interval that you specify. They can be used for, you might want to, I don't know, clean up data on a 6 monthly basis or archive things. I've seen them used for sending batches of letters out overnight. If you wanted to send letters to all your customers that had contacted you that day. So there's lots of uses for those. Next, there's desktop flows. So desktop flows are used to automate tasks on the web or on your desktop. They're basically aimed at automating things where there is no connection. So this might be a legacy application or an application that's sitting on your computer or on a server. If you want to connect those things with a modern web application, you would use a desktop flow to do that. It can be used a little bit like the macros in Excel, if anybody has ever used those, where you can sort of record the steps that you want to take, and then you can get the desktop flow to follow those steps. So really handy if people are copying and pasting data from a legacy system into a new one, or trying to extract data from a web form, and populate it somewhere else. The last type is business process flows. A business process flow is used with Dataverse. You embed them within a model-driven app. So there are some ones already existing in Dynamics 365. In the sales app, for instance, you've got the lead to opportunity flow. So that's a good example. but they basically guide users through the different tasks in a process. They used to make sure that people follow the same process every time, that they're filling in the same data. A lot of people I've seen using those for training to make sure that new members of staff are easily able to follow the same process as everybody else and that they're not missing anything. So let's move on. Let's talk about flows themselves. Microsoft provides the ability to share templates. So for every connector that there is, you'll find that there's already a huge amount of templates available. They're all found in the main page of Power Automate. I'll show you where they are in a second. And each template contains a fully working Power Automate flow that you can either just use as is, or you can edit that and add your own steps and use it as a starting point for your own flows. So this is a really good place if you're not sure if something can be done, or you're trying to write a flow and you're having trouble with it. There will nearly always be some kind of template that you can use as a starting point that will work, that will be a complete flow. The only caveat on this is that you as a user have to have access to the connection that the flow is using. So you can see some of the ones on the screen right now. We've got things like save a Gmail attachment to a Dropbox folder. Obviously, that's assuming that the customer or that the user has access to Gmail and to the Dropbox folder that they're trying to send the attachments to. The security around Flow, obviously there are licenses around Power Automate, but it's very much relying on your access to the data that you're connecting to. So if you're connecting to a SharePoint site, for instance, if you don't have access to that specific site, you won't be able to use it in your flow, and the flow would fail if you try to run it. So let's look at the key components of flows. The first thing, and we've already mentioned them a little bit, is connectors. So connectors allow you to connect apps and data and devices within the cloud. There are over 300 connectors available. I think this is now probably tipping 400 connectors. They're being added to all the time as different companies decide that they want to hook into Power Platform. If you don't have a connector, if you can't find a connector for the system that you want to link to, you can create custom connectors as long as you can link to an API. It's possible to build your own custom connector to create that link. You can do that yourself. So yeah, it's really simple to do. You can see there's a variation of connectors. I just put a screenshot showing a small handful. But you've got things like Microsoft Dataverse, we've got Office 365, we've got SharePoint, but also Oracle, Twitter. And again, this is obviously dependent on your access to those data sources. Microsoft also splits the connectors into two. So there are premium connectors and standard connectors. The standard connectors are free. The premium connectors, there's a cost for. So Microsoft Dataverse, there is a cost for connecting to that, whereas Excel is free to connect to, so is SharePoint. So yeah, something to have a look at. There is a huge list of connectors in the Microsoft Docs page that we can give you access to later. So moving on to triggers. So as we said earlier, a trigger is the starting point for your flow. And depending on the kind of flow that you want to run, a trigger could be when a record is updated. It could be when the user presses a button. The screenshot here is talking about automated cloud flows. So this is something that is triggered when something else happens. And you can see the examples there, you know, when a file's created in a folder in SharePoint, or when a planner task has been assigned to me or to a user. So we're triggering flows based on other things that are happening, or based on somebody clicking a button, or based on it being a particular time of the day for a scheduled flow. Once you've chosen the trigger, the Flow then expects you to add the steps that you want your flow to run through. So once your triggers happen, what do you actually want to do? Um, you can choose any number of connections. So each action will be linked to a particular connection. And each connection has then a range of different things that you can do within it. So you can probably see in the screenshot there, we've got Office 365 Outlook. We can see that there's a get contact um, action there, but there's also a get email. Depending on the connection, you'll have a different set of actions linked to it. Each action, when you add it, can access the information that was retrieved by the actions and the triggers before it. And I will show you this in the demo. We'll sort of demonstrate how that works. But it means that you can literally go and get the information and then process it and then do something else with it. Every single connection has an input and an output, and you can always use those outputs further down in the flow. There's also a range of inbuilt actions that come as part of Power Automate, such as switches, conditions, so if statements, and apply to each, which allow you to loop around records. And these things allow you to direct the flow according to the data that you've got that you're working with. So it really means that you can do quite complex things inside Power Automate and have multiple branches with different outcomes. So let's have a look at the demo. I will just bring across my Power Automate area. So this is the Power Automate area that I work in. You can see this is the home page, and it's giving you some handy templates here. These are templates that have been used a lot. So we've got push notifications happening, saving email attachments to OneDrive. You can start a flow from a template. So you can always come and look at any of the templates that are here and find one that suits you. If I searched in here for something like planner, you'll see that it'll take me to a search, and here's all the different templates that are possible that have been created. And the little boxes at the top are showing you the different connections that are being used. So this one is sort of on a timer and it's just using Planner, but this one's also using sort of Office, it's using Outlook and SharePoint, various different things. So the first thing I'm going to do is say that I want to create a new flow. I'm going to create one from scratch. And I'm going to create an automated cloud flow. Now, the flow that I want to create is going to basically pick up when I've had a new response to a particular form. I'm going to show you the form in a minute. But this is an activities form. Let's say activities form response. And I'm going to say that I want this flow to trigger when somebody responds to my form. So we'll do that and we'll click on create. So straight away, it's giving me this trigger here. It's saying when a new response is submitted. I'm just going to nip over to the form and show you what the form looks like. So we've got that this is like a work activities club. It's basically saying which team do you belong to in the company? What kinds of activities would you like the company to organise? There's a yes, no. Have you ever been on a work event before? And then if you have, it asks you to rate the event. So I've got a little bit of a branch here. We'll run through this and I'll show you what happens. But basically, when somebody responds to this, I want to be notified of it. I want the Power Automate to see that a response has happened and then tell me in Teams and via email so that I don't have to come and check the form for myself every day and see who's responded and collate those answers. So the first thing I'm going to do is say which form it is that I'm interested in. And I'm going to say here that it's my activities club form. Just to show as well, the connection is using my login here. This is how it knows what my access rights is and which forms I have available to me. So it's logging in as me. I can add new connections and I can log in as different users if I wanted to, if I had the password. I know that one of the best practice recommendations for big companies is that we set up service users so that flows aren't just owned by a specific person and they're available to perhaps the whole IT team. But I'm logged in as me here. So my new step, I'm then going to say that let's look for forms. So I want to get the details of the response. Once I've had a response submitted, I want to get all of those details so that I can use them. And again, I'm going to pick that it's the activities club form. And then I'm going to choose, I want to know the specific response. I could just give it any ID, but I want the ID of the response that was just submitted. And can you see when I clicked into this field here, it's giving me this option over on the right-hand side to see dynamic content. The only thing that I'm being given by the trigger, and you can see the name here when a new response is submitted, that's the same as the trigger. The only thing that I'm getting out of that is the response ID. So I'm going to choose that there. This is the response ID that I'm interested in. And then once I've got those details, what do I want to do? Well, the first thing I want to do is send an email. So I'm going to have a look at my Outlook options, Office 365 Outlook. And I'm going to send an email. So I'm just going to open this whole thing up so that you can see these are the Outlook send an email actions. So in here, I'm going to send it to myself. I'm going to say that the subject of the email is response from form. And then in the body of the email, I'm going to put specific information about who responded and what they wanted to what the information was that they gave us. So I'm going to say response from, and over here again, because I'm in this, because I've clicked into a field, I get the dynamic content. So now I'm actually getting the information from the get response details action. And it's saying, here's the answers to all the questions, but it's also got the responder's email. That just comes as standard as part of the forms connection. So I'm going to click on there. There's the responder's email. I'm going to say, let's see what team they're in. So which team do you belong to? And I'm going to say interests, and I'll put the activities answer in there as well. You can change the fonts here. You can add bold text, so I can make things bold if I want to. You've got HTML capabilities here. You can also copy people into the email if you want. You can send it on behalf of somebody else if you've got the ability to do that. And you could add attachments here. So if you've got a particular document in a SharePoint folder, for instance, you could retrieve that document or the details of it and attach it to the email before you send. So there's a number of different things, and we can say how important it is. So I'm going to put this as really important and say that it's high. So that's the first kind of notification that I want to have. The second thing that I want to do is I want to send a Teams notification. So I'm going to choose Microsoft Teams, and what I'd like to do is post a message. So I'm going to post as the Flowbot, and I'm going to post in the chat with the Flowbot because basically I want the Flowbot to send me a message personally. So again, I can pick me, and our message is going to be you had a response. Put the email address in there again. So again, you can just click on these fields to add them into the text boxes. And that's me really happy with that flow. I'm going to save it. If there were any issues with this, instead of getting a green box at the top, I would get a pink one. And the flow checker here shows if there are any errors or warnings within the flow. So it allows you to really look and test to see if all of this is correct before you run it. Now, I'm going to just go back to this page here. It tells me that the flow is ready to go, which is good. We've not run it yet, so it's waiting. It's not got any run history. This page is where we can see all the different connections. We can control who the owners of the flow are, but we're also going to be able to see the data. We're going to be able to see the actual run and what it really did when it ran. So if I go over to my form, and I'm going to just use the preview to be able to send a response to this. So I'm going to say that I belong to the marketing team. What kind of activities would I like? I'm going to say rock climbing. Have I been on a work event before? Yes, and it was amazing. I want to submit that. So this is saying, thanks, your response was submitted. Brilliant. If I go back to here and just refresh, you can see now that that flow ran. It's telling me the status, so it could be succeeded or failed or cancelled. And when I click on here, it will open up and it will show us what ran. Now, the first time that we ever do this with a flow, it always takes a little bit of time. I'm just going to go back and click on that again and make sure it doesn't take too long. There we are. So we can see now the little tick boxes against each step. It shows you where it got up to in the flow. If it had failed, it would have like a red X at the point that it fell over. So you'd be able to see how far the flow got and what specific bit that it got to, which action was it that it didn't like and there was an error with. The other thing you can do that's really nice is you can open up these triggers and actions and you can see the data. So in here, for instance, we asked it to get the response number 10. And here's all the data that we just typed in. With the submission time, it knows exactly what it's doing. This is the JSON response. We can see that it has sent an email. So here's the data again that I put in there. It's just showing that the body, the HTML. And here is the message that we sent via the Flowbot. So again, if you're having any issues with your flows, you can see exactly what data was being run and what it did with that data. If I just show you over here, I'm going to show you now in Teams. This is the response. You had a response to the activities form. It's put my email address in because it knows it's me. So that's the one that's just been created now. I just minimize that and go over to my email. Oops. Be able to show you as well that appeared. So here's the email from the activity form, and you can see it's put all the data in that we expected. It's been sent with high importance, so I'm really happy that this flow is working. And I would probably leave that on now and it would just run in the background, so every time I got a response to that form, it would tell me and I wouldn't have to keep going and looking. So you can see this is a really, really simple flow. Didn't take long to set up at all. And is fairly easy to use, but just would save somebody time if they were having to go and check something constantly. And this is what we use Power Automate for, where there's repetitive things that people are doing, and we just want to speed that up and make their life simpler. If I go back then, let's have a look at some real life examples, some things that we've actually done. So we had a customer that had an HR team, and they had an issue where employees weren't completing their return to work forms when they'd come back from being sick. The current process was that the HR team would check the system, they'd see who'd returned to work, they'd then write them all down, they'd manually send emails to each employee trying to remind them, or with attached forms asking them to fill things in. And then they'd have to go back into the HR system and say, I've sent an email on this date, and then update HR again when the employee responded. So quite long-winded, lots of manual typing of emails going on. So what we did was we replaced this with a Power Automate. We said when the HR system is updated, when we actually get the sickness record is closed, then the Power Automate finds the employees and the manager's email addresses. It automatically sent emails out to the employee and the manager. And then when they responded, it updated the HR system notes. So it sort of went back into the HR system and said, we've sent the email on this date. Oh, and if they respond, we've had this information as well. So we used Power Automate just to cut out that whole process that they were doing every week. Every Monday, I think they were spending an hour or so doing that across the whole HR team. So that's quite a small thing. This was a larger issue that we dealt with. This was where the users were updating, they had the CRM system and they needed to send contract documents out to customers using DocuSign. So the existing process was that they entered some information into CRM. They then had to copy that information manually into a Word template. They would create a new envelope in DocuSign, upload that document against a particular template, then send the DocuSign envelope to the customer. And then they'd wait. And when the customer signed the contract via DocuSign again, they'd have to go into DocuSign, review the signed contract, extract that and upload it into SharePoint, and then go back into the CRM system to say the customer signed the contract on this date. So again, quite a long-winded process. We replaced that with two different Power Automate flows. So the first one says when the contract record's been updated, first of all, it was requesting approval using that out-of-the-box approval functionality that I discussed earlier. It was sending an approval to the team managers to say, are you happy for us to send the contract out? Once they got that approval, the Word template is then auto-populated using the details from the contract record. We then created a DocuSign envelope, again using Power Automate, and added the document to it. And then we also used the DocuSign connectors to send the DocuSign envelope. Once the customer signs the contract via DocuSign, we're then we're checking to see if the DocuSign envelope's been completed. If it is, we send an email to the user to tell them that the contract's been signed. We extract the document and upload it into SharePoint. And then finally, we update the status of the contract back into the CRM system. So two flows, more complicated, both of them, definitely, but saving a lot of time and meaning that all the customer needed to do was just update the CRM system and then the rest of this happened for them. So a lot simpler than what they were doing originally. So I'm really hoping that you've enjoyed the demonstration. If you want some more information, then please have a chat to Sam on the Quantic stand today. He can talk to you about this envisioning workshop. Sorry. It basically will help your organization identify the priorities that you have to work out how you can take advantage of Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform to make sure that we can identify what challenges you've got and look at how these products can help you basically moving forward. Feel free to get in touch via email. It's down at the bottom of the screen there at tellmemore@bytes.co.uk, or give us a call on the phone number that's there. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. We're now happy to take questions. in the chat. Have a good day. Thank you very much.